There's a lot of imitation that goes on in mapping. Once I've decided what I want an area to look like, I load up other existing maps that already have similar props and locations. I then take lots of screenshots and use these to detail my map until I'm happy with it. For this map, for example, I benchmarked my bombsite A against Monastery, the offices at T-Spawn against those in Office, and the warehouses against those in Assault. This is the point where you can really admire how artistic the mappers at Valve are. They can make large parts of the map look great just by adding very few, but well placed and chosen details. Of course, you don't want to copy them completely, but just like a child trying to imitate their dad's painting, or when you try to play a song you know on the piano for the first time, the result tends to bear no resemblance to the original thing, and even if it does, you'd be surprised by how different the combinations of the same elements can be. In fact, this applies to most things you can make in life, and serves as a great way to get you started in things you may have no experience in yourself. Take Chris Hulsbeck's Tornado tune for example. I used this to try and make my first proper song, and it turned out like this. Same tune, but different in every other way. Back to mapping. When detailing a map, you have your favourite areas. It's inevitable. There are some parts that you nurture and build on from an early stage, and there are others that you almost have to botch and make last minute because you have to. What's interesting is that how I make them doesn't seem to have any bearing on their end quality. I love the back area leading to A from T-Spawn. I like this factory area. I like this dark little alleyway as well. None of these areas were created from a vivid idea, nor did I enjoy working on them. Compare this with the church or the large building at A. Both of these areas were originally proudly placed and stretched until they looked impressive as solid, undetailed blocks. I could picture them in my head, and yet couldn't be bothered to work on them. They seemed like too large a project to even comprehend, and it was only in the last week or so when I had to grit my teeth, reward myself with sweets, and sit in a darkened room for hours on end that they actually got done. The building at A looked horrible. It stood out like a sore thumb, and I didn't know what to do with it. At a very late stage, I replaced its material with a warmer orange one, and suddenly it looked great. I'd say it's the best looking part of the site and immediately draws your eye. It's so warm and comforting. I spent ages detailing the sheltered area around the church. It looked amazing in the editor, then I loaded it up and was like, nah. I then compared it to an earlier version and was shocked at just how much prettier the earlier version was. Was I better off starting again with this area, or was it almost like a half-finished project that would suddenly look great once additional work had been done on it? Vex and myself added displacements early on. It's something I tend to leave until the end, but there was a benefit from doing it early. It made the map darker. The big problem with the church area was the materials I had replaced the walls and floor with. They were less bright, and because of that the scene lost its beautiful, clean glow that earlier versions had. I think that I managed to get it back by upping the sun's brightness and colours, and by choosing lighter tiles on the church. Making the roof shorter let more sunlight reach the bomb site as well, which helped to improve things. The statue was a great addition. Before then, the site was a mess of buildings and clutter. The statue serves as a focal point, which really makes the site more memorable. If done wrong, both of these tight corridors could have turned out disastrously. Not much light reaches the ground, and it could feel really claustrophobic and corridory. I guess the main thing is to make sure it's decently lit. With the warehouse, the walls are mostly a bright material. The snow on the ground also helps. I made sure that the wall receiving the sunlight was taller than the other one, allowing for sunlight to bounce down from above. I ended up adding some sunlight coloured entities to give this area a warm glow radiating down from above. Also notice how I break up the skyline. It's easy to spend a lot of time detailing the floor and walls, but it's where the map hits the skyline that you've really got to detail. I did this by making the building messy. Some bits are taller than others. Some areas stick in and others jut out. The pipes were a finishing touch to give this area more character. The same principles apply here. Look up and you'll see things sticking out. I was able to use an assortment of props to add yet more detail to the edges of the buildings. At one point I think I lit this area up with lights, but as it progressed I decided that it was bright enough already, and the flat lighting in this area of the map probably made it easier to pick out enemies from. It also nicely contrasts with the warmth from inside the marketplace. Now onto my favourite part of the map. The same principles apply here. I break up the skyline with detail and alter the height of the walls. I think that this is the most successful part of the map as far as lighting is concerned. There's a beautiful contrast between the orange glow of the sun bouncing off the buildings and the icy blue shadows of the structures opposite. It's all very easy on the eyes, and players stand out against the rather faded backgrounds. The chimney in the distance was a lucky accident. I randomly placed it in to show where the factories were, and it just happened to be in the perfect place to be visible all along this corridor. Much like the statue is to the graveyard, the chimney here adds a focal point to a pretty, but otherwise generic, row of buildings. Interestingly, if you look at this from the other end, you'll see a mountain between the buildings, really adding to the feel of conflict in this map between the factories and the quaint mountain village. I wasn't happy with these factories. They were added in early on and I always thought I'd go back and redo them, but the deadline was reached and they ended up not mattering too much in the grand scale of things. They're tall enough to be visible from bombsite A and light the rest of the area up thanks to their light colours, so I guess they turned out okay after all. I haven't talked much about the marketplace or the factory. These are the two areas where Vex did most of the detailing, since I find interiors far less exciting than exteriors, and she's the opposite. I was responsible for making the initial structure of the buildings, you know, like the layouts and how tall the ceiling would be. She would then find suitable props and place them artistically, then I could return to those areas near the end and add some final touches. I didn't add much to the marketplace, but with the factory I added some lights and the interior offices. And finally, CT Spawn. With a mixture of displacements and props, it was easy to botch together a precarious path around the church. I don't have any time lapses showing it since I did it all in one go. One of those grit your teeth and do it moments. It's not the most detailed area of the map, but it serves its purpose and sets the scene for the rest of it. A good first impression is worth a lot in CSGO. Vex kept insisting on adding the ice texture, and when she showed me it I was blown away. It barely required any tweaking, and I'm sure you all know it's one of the key selling features of the map. And now I'll show you some footage from this stage of development. Bear in mind that Welshie hadn't seen it since the time it was mainly square areas with a lot of blocks thrown about. Yet another good thing about showing people maps from an early stage is that they are then impressed when areas get detailed and turn out completely differently to how they remembered them.
It lives up to my expectations. Okay, I'm in. Oh, wow. It's okay, it's just black. I'm not racist, by the way. Oh, it's black. Ooh, it looks like poo. Philip!
Another person will spot problems in areas you think you've sorted out. Welshie would detect things that had evaded days of playtesting within seconds.
You should probably like write this down or something.
This is a very good idea. Don't expect to remember every problem. I'd write things down, then scribble them out as they were fixed. I told him that the graves would later be replaced with higher quality models. They were simply placeholders for the purposes of cover at the moment. One of the major problems later on is when you add small details, like random props, and think nothing more of it.
Disable shadows on the props, fella!
Because they're small, problems with them often go unnoticed, until somebody else checks your map.
This actually looks pretty decent. I would say it's amazing, because I'm, like, easily impressed. Ooh. Oh wow, look at the lighting, oh my god, wow.
Yay, he noticed a small thing that most people wouldn't.
Oh, now I like this.
It's always nice to have playtesters who occasionally give compliments as well as constructive criticism.
Who did this? Was this you, like all the jaggedness?
Yes, it was me. Changing this from a platform to a house would alter the gameplay, but it was worth trying because it ultimately became a big feature of Middle.
Yeah, this changed a lot. See if you changed that house that was here. Pretty sure there was a house here, wasn't it? Or was that the other side of the map?
There were a couple of houses that I made somewhere, then repositioned. This was one of them.
You probably noticed this already, but the displacements on the snow or whatever is a bit... Whoa. Jesus Christ. What happened to the window? What happened to the window?
Oh yeah, just saving that for later.
Oh yeah. The Gary spot.
I was very proud of a window I had added, and just had to share it with him.
Oh, that looks nice. Oh, it looks like mustard. Give me some.
I found one massive glitch since I had copy-pasted a prop that had collision disabled for gameplay reasons in another part of the level. However, in this part I hadn't added any sort of clipping. I challenged Welshie to find me.
You release the map as that and you're like, oh, I've never tried this. Oh. That shouldn't take too long to fix, to be honest, you know. Just add clipping and that's it.
I then had a horrible feeling that I had done the same with other props.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Still, better to find these things now than for someone else to discover them post-release. I'm pretty sure I left another thing unclipped though. Probably just my imagination. And that concludes the detailing stage. On to the crunch period.